The Haddingtonshire Courier Shipwreck Report, mid-1800s to early 1900s. The Firth of Forth has been one of several important shipping areas for many centuries. The early coastal trade was not as prolific as that of the West Coast, but it was still important in its day. Trade with Scandinavia has always featured in Forth shipping, particularly the Baltic wood trade, which came to Ness and other Forth ports. The movement of coal by sea was also central to early British trade and industry. Many ships traded with the British Empire, with the export of whisky being especially important. There has also been large amounts of naval shipping using the Forth for many years. Unsurprisingly, mainland Scotland's 6,000 miles of coastline are peppered with many wrecks ranging from ships trashed on rocks long before lighthouses existed to warships sunk during the dark days of the First and Second World Wars. For much of the maritime history of the Forth, there were no lights or lighthouses, and furthermore, ships were at the mercy of the winds. Many fine ships were lost due to these circumstances. For instance, some 500 were lost between 1850 and 1900 alone.
An extract from the History of Dunbar, published in 1859 by James Miller, goes like this. 1847, December the 6th. The weather, which had been uncommonly mild for the season, changed on Sunday, when the neighbourhood of Dunbar was visited by a storm of snow and hail from the southward, and towards the evening of Monday, the wind became high, amounting to a perfect hurricane from the southeast, accompanied by rain and sleet. The sea set with tremendous fury, and melancholy to relate, with great loss of life and property on the coast, and on the morning of Tuesday, the shore betwixt Berwick and Dunbar was literally strewed with wrecks. Earlier records are incomplete and delusive, but suggest that many more vessels must have been lost. More recently, the main causes of shipwrecks are collisions and running aground, while during World War I and World War II, submarine torpedoes, mines and attack by aircraft were additional hazards which accounted for a substantial number of the wrecks.
The waters off the coast of East Lothian are littered with wrecks, and some of the incidents are reported in the Haddingtonshire Courier newspaper. Some of the incidents are as follows. In a letter to the editor dated 8th November 1859, a Mr. James Dall gave an eyewitness account to the wreck of schooner Bubona of Aberdeen off the coast of North Berwick. He provides his account to ensure that locals and readers of the newspaper did not think that the crew of the ship had become victims of a fatal mistake on the part of the Coastguard.
In an extended pre-Christmas article dated 23rd of December 1870, the rugged coast near Seacliff, 3 or 4 miles east of North Berwick, became the focus in relation to loss of life. The article mentions, "No part of the east coast is fraught with more danger to the tempest-tossed mariner than the line of breakers that stretches for several miles along the shore between Seacliff and Tantallon, and many a gallant seaman has here found a sailor's grave." This 1870 news article refers to 2 vessels and the shattered fragments of a wreck that was strewn along the coast. The Blossom of Aberdeen, carrying a cargo of coals and a crew of 5 men, including the shipmaster, was sailing from Shields to Aberdeen. The ship was driven on the Car Rock and almost immediately went to pieces, her crew perishing in the waves. Similarly, the schooner Renovatio, bound from St Andrews to Portsmouth, with a cargo of potatoes and a crew of 4, was also dashed to pieces on the Car Rock. These incidents happened at night, and the next morning a search party discovered a seaman lying within a high water mark in a state of total unconsciousness. The man, John Williamson, was taken to Seacliff House, where he recovered, and relayed the sequence of events. It turned out that John Williamson had been involved in 3 other mishaps that winter, but he claimed that this time was a real narrow escape. There were no survivors from the Blossom of Aberdeen.
On the 27th of March 1903, the Courier reported a shipwreck near Dunbar. A schooner by the name of Guide, sailing from London to Ness, carrying pig iron, stranded on the reef of rocks known as the Meadow, in close proximity to White Sands. The 7-man crew refused to leave when a lifeboat arrived to rescue them. But when the vessel's position became so perilous, the crew quickly availed themselves of the means of rescue. A seaman even fell overboard and nearly drowned, but fortunately was saved. The crew were provided with dinner and then sent to their respective homes by Mr. Sinclair, who was the local honorary secretary of the Shipwrecked Mariners' Society.
The Haddingtonshire Courier also highlighted the crucial work of lifeboatmen. In a report dated 31st of January 1896, a certain Dr. Matheson delivered an interesting and instructive lecture to lifeboatmen at Fishermen's Hall in North Berwick. The lecture was on methods of restoring someone who was unconscious and appeared to be drowned, and it included some practical illustrations. In the 17th July 1914 edition, the Courier reported on a gallant act by Mr. Clark, a coastguardsman. Mr. Clark's heroic efforts in connection with a Norwegian schooner called Castor, stranded off the coast near Seacliff, was brought to the attention of the Norwegian consul at Leith in Edinburgh. Recognising the dangerous position in which the ship's captain placed himself under by refusing to leave the vessel, Mr. Clark went across in the breeches buoy of the rocket apparatus and persuaded the man to come to shore. Mr. Clark's gallant act was filmed by someone who was then called an animated picture photographer, and who happened to be on the scene at the time. This unique short film was later screened at Scott Cinema in both North Berwick and Dunbar.
The Norwegian steamer Prosum was stranded at Thornton Lock on the night of 24th October 1908 while en route to Grangemouth. The crew of 17 took to their boats and were landed by the lifeboat Sarah Kay, sailing from nearby Skate Raw. She broke in two after running onto the bathe reef and eventually was broken up for scrap. This postcard shows a stranded ship broken into 2 almost equal parts, both still upright on coastal rocks. This photograph was made as a magic lantern slide. It shows the wreck of a Danish brigantine on Schuylkill Rocks, East Lothian in 1888. Newspaper articles suggest that sights such as this attracted throngs of visitors. Note a group of male and female figures on the lower left.
The identity of the large ship in this photograph is uncertain. However, the image is consistent with the recorded loss of the iron bark called Ecclefechan, which stranded close to Barnes Ness, southeast of Dunbar, on 23rd February 1900. And here is a large group of men standing in front of a ship or shipwreck in the Firth of Forth at Oxwellmains near Dunbar.
The Talus of Greenock left Shield in ballast for Fredrikstad, Norway. The ballast shifted in a gale, which resulted in the vessel being thrown on her beam ends. The SS Trelleborg of Copenhagen stood by and rescued the crew of 30, the captain's wife and 3 children. The Talus went ashore off Dunbar on the 20th of February 1920. Later, she was put on an even keel and towed to Leith.
East Lothian's proximity to the sea has led to many of its coastal towns and villages witnessing many storms and shipwrecks. This photograph was taken at around 1900. It details one wreck where a large ship looks to have been dashed near Dunbar. Shipwrecks like this were frequently the talk of the local community for weeks after the event. A wreck on the coast often provided a talking point for Dunbar's many Victorian holiday visitors. Here we see a group of men and women pose amidst a substantial spread of the ship's timbers. The group appear well dressed, and all 4 seated members have walking sticks.
This Coastguard unit was stationed at North Berwick. Their carriage was loaded and had a painted sign saying Board of Trade 235. It contained apparatus used to rescue survivors from shipwrecks by means of rocket-launched lines. The uniform of the Coastguards was influenced by the service's long association with the Royal Navy. The Board of Trade rocket patrol apparatus was located at number 14 Melbourne Road, North Berwick. The site of the rocket patrol apparatus station was presumably chosen because it was fairly central to the rocks in Millsey Bay.
We end this presentation with a real-life story. In 2019, a Norwegian man by the name of Steinar Helvik visited the John Gray Centre and shared his East Lothian shipwreck-related family story. Nearly 130 years after a tragic shipwreck at Carr Rock, Seacliff, in February 1890, Mr. Helvik found his ancestor's grave. He and his wife visited Seacliff Beach and Carr Rock to see where the wreck of the schooner Liberal was found and where the seamen were washed ashore. There was a crew of 6, and 5 of them are interred at St. Mary's Parish Church in Whitekirk. Mr. and Mrs. Helvik brought with them a burial wreath from Norway made of reindeer moss and a laminated printout of information, both of which they laid at the site in memory of Mr. Helvik's great-grandfather, Sivert Hansen, who was born in 1859 and died in 1890. Sivert had married Ingeborg Sophie on January 15, 1890. 1 month later, he went out with the schooner Liberal, and 10 days later the ship crashed at Carr Rock. Sivert probably didn't know that his wife was pregnant when he left. Later that year, she gave birth to a little boy and gave him his father's name, Sivert. This Sivert was Mr. Helvik's grandfather. He later took the family name Helvik from the place he was born and raised. With a bit of research, Mr. Helvik also found a descendant of the ship's captain, Rolf Mikkelsen. His great-granddaughter lives in the United States, and Mr. Helvik has shared all the information he found with the captain's family there.
We hope you have enjoyed our brief presentation on some historical shipwrecks in East Lothian. For more information, please contact the Local History Service by sending an email to history@eastlothian.gov.uk. Thank you for listening.